Devlin Carter was 41 years old, and for 18 months, his ex-wife Priya believed she had left him with nothing. She was partially right. He was driving a rusted 1997 pickup with a broken passenger door and a suit 2 seasons out of style. What Priya didn't know, what nobody in that house knew, was that the man parking his own truck in her circular driveway had quietly built a $47 million development empire while she wasn't watching. She had stood in front of her colleagues, her mother, and her new fiancé and laughed at his truck. Pitying laughter, the kind that assumes the story is already over. What Priya didn't know was that 18 months earlier, Devlin had accidentally received an email that revealed exactly what she and her fiancé had done to him. During the marriage, during the divorce, and after. He hadn't said a word. He had simply decided to wait for the right moment. And somewhere across Atlanta, his assistant was already pulling his matte black Ferrari out of the Buckhead garage. Tonight was that moment. And Priya had no idea what was about to park behind her rusted pickup. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The truck shuddered when Devlin downshifted at the corner of Peachtree Hills Drive, like it always did. A low, tired rattle from somewhere behind the dash. He'd stopped trying to find where it came from a long time ago. He drove slowly, not because he was lost, because he wanted to see the neighborhood the way a stranger would see it. The wide lots, the deep lawns, the houses set back far enough from the road that you had to earn the view. Old money liked distance. It liked making you travel toward it. The Harmon estate sat at the end of a curved driveway, lined with landscape lighting. Small brass fixtures pushed into the mulch every 4 feet, like tiny sentinels. Devlin counted them as he pulled in. 16 on the right side alone. He parked at the far end of the driveway, near the hedgerow, away from the catered vans and the row of cars that probably cost more than some people's houses. A black Range Rover, 2 Mercedes sedans, a pearl-white Porsche with a vanity plate he didn't bother reading. The F-150 coughed once when he killed the engine. The driver's door groaned when he pushed it open, a sound like a question it had been asking for years. He sat still for a moment. The bottle of Barolo he'd brought rested on the passenger seat. Not the most expensive wine he owned. Not the cheapest, either. Just good. The kind of bottle a careful man brings to a party he was invited to out of obligation and accepted out of intention. He picked it up, got out, walked toward the light. Inside, the party was already warm with the particular energy of people performing well for each other. Laughter that came a little too fast. Compliments offered like handshakes. The kind of gathering where everyone was simultaneously the audience and the show. Priya had done the place exactly right. Floral arrangements in deep burgundy and ivory. Waitstaff in black moving through the crowd with practiced smoothness. A string quartet in the corner playing something low and European that nobody was actually listening to, but everyone appreciated existing. Devlin took a glass of champagne from a passing tray. He didn't drink it. He held it and looked around the room. Bryce Fontaine was near the bar, where Devlin expected him to be. A big man, broad through the shoulders, with the kind of tan that said either vacation or vanity. He was telling a story to 4 people who were all leaning slightly toward him. His hands moved when he talked. His watch caught the light every time they did. The story ended with a number, and the 4 people around him laughed like the number was the punchline. Maybe it was. Devlin watched him, the way you watch weather. Calm. Cataloging. Dev. He turned. Priya Harmon moved through the room like she'd choreographed it. She probably had. She was in a deep green dress that made her look exactly like the kind of woman who lived in this house, in this zip code, at this stage of life. Her smile was warm and wide. She kissed the air beside his cheek. Her hand pressed his arm briefly. The way you greet someone in front of people you want to impress. I'm so glad you came, she said. Really? It means a lot. Congratulations, Devlin said. You look happy. I am. She glanced toward Bryce. He's wonderful. You'll see. Behind her, 3 women in cocktail dresses were watching. Her colleagues, by the look of them, sharp, networked, assessing. And beside one of them stood Priya's mother, Eleanor Harmon, in a cream blazer and pearls, her silver hair set with the kind of precision that suggested a standing appointment. Eleanor looked at Devlin the way she always had, like something that had been delivered to the wrong address. Priya turned back to him, still smiling, and then, so naturally that it looked accidental, her eyes drifted toward the driveway visible through the front window. Her head tilted just slightly. Dev. She said his name like a gentle correction. Tell me that pickup truck isn't actually yours. A small laugh, already waiting in her throat. You're 41 years old, sweetheart. The 3 colleagues smiled. One of them pressed her lips together, trying not to laugh and not fully succeeding. Eleanor Harmon's expression didn't change, which was its own kind of comment. The laughter that followed wasn't sharp. That was the thing about it. It was soft, almost kind. The kind of laughter that said poor thing without saying anything at all. Devlin smiled. Easy. Unhurried. Drove it all the way from Buckhead, he said. He said it the same way he might have said, nice evening or good to be here. Like it was simply a fact about the world. He took a small sip of his champagne. Priya's smile stayed in place, but something behind it shifted. A barely there flicker, like a light in a room 1 floor up. Then the conversation moved on, the way conversations at parties always do, and the moment folded itself into the noise. Devlin set his champagne glass down on a nearby table. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. He typed 1 word. Now. He slipped the phone back into his pocket, turned to the man standing to his left, a structural engineer from Marietta who wanted to talk about a condo project, and smiled like he had nowhere else to be. He didn't. The structural engineer from Marietta was still talking. Something about load-bearing walls, something about a contractor who kept missing deadlines. Devlin nodded at the right moments, made the right sounds, and let the man's voice become part of the background, like the string quartet, like the clinking glasses, like the low, warm hum of a party that didn't know it was being watched. Behind his eyes, 18 months ago. It had been a Tuesday, ordinary in every way that mattered. Devlin had been at the firm's old office on Peachtree Street, a rented space, 2 rooms and a conference table, going through refinancing paperwork on a commercial property in Decatur. A mid-sized mixed-use project, 4 stories, retail on the ground floor, office space above. The kind of deal that required patience and a lot of phone calls. Kwame was across the table from him, reading something on his laptop, his reading glasses pushed to the end of his nose. The room smelled like coffee that had been sitting too long. Devlin's email pinged. He almost didn't open it. The subject line was a string of forwarded headers, the kind of thing that looked like an accidental reply chain from someone's inbox. A banker's assistant at First Meridian, based on the signature. A woman named Donna Reyes. He almost deleted it. He opened it instead. The chain was 7 emails long. It took him 1 full read to understand who the names were. It took him a second read to understand what they were saying. It took a third read, slower, the way you reread something when your mind keeps flinching away from the meaning, to understand what it meant. Priya's name was in the second email. Bryce Fontaine's name was in all of them. Bryce, who Priya had introduced at a dinner 2 years earlier as a commercial real estate broker, a colleague, someone she'd crossed paths with through a client, a big man with an easy laugh and a watch that caught the light. You two should talk shop sometime, Priya had said. Devlin had shaken the man's hand and thought nothing of it. The email chain told a different story, a longer one. one that had been running quietly underneath his marriage, like water beneath a floor, invisible until the damage was already done. Priya had access to his project files. That was normal. They'd been married. She was meticulous about her own work, and she'd helped him organize his more than once. Timelines, bid documents, client communications. He'd trusted her with it, the way you trust someone who sleeps in the same bed. Without thinking about it, without measuring it, she had been sharing those files with Bryce. Not all at once, carefully, selectively. Bid figures, client meeting summaries, projected timelines that told a skilled broker exactly how much a developer was willing to spend and how badly he needed a given deal to close. Bryce had been feeding that information to a competing development group, a firm called Meridian South, whose name Devlin recognized immediately because he had lost 3 contracts to them in the final year of his marriage. 3 deals he'd spent 18 months cultivating, 18 months of client dinners and site visits, and carefully prepared proposals. The losing bids had confused him at the time. His numbers had been competitive. He'd been close on all 3. Close enough that the rejections stung in a specific way. The way losing by 1 point stings different from losing by 20. Now he understood why. His numbers weren't just close. They were known. Meridian South had underbid him by margins too precise to be coincidence. They had underbid him by margins you could only hit if you already knew what you were shooting at. She hadn't just left him. She'd mined him on the way out. He sat with the email chain for 4 hours. He didn't call anyone. He didn't speak. He went for a walk around the block twice, came back, made a sandwich he didn't eat, and sat back down at the table. Then he called Kwame. He didn't explain everything on the phone. He just said, "I need you to come back to the office." Kwame came. He read the emails. He was quiet for a long time, which was how Kwame processed things. Not with noise, but with stillness. Finally, he took his glasses off and set them on the table. "What do you want to do?" Kwame asked. Devlin looked at the emails on the screen. At Priya's name in the second message. At Bryce Fontaine's name running through all of them like a thread. "I want her to watch," he said. The structural engineer from Marietta had moved on to a different story. Something about a city permit. Devlin nodded once. The memory folded back down into the quiet place where he kept it. Organized, contained, not gone. He picked up a fresh glass of champagne from a passing tray. Across the room, Bryce Fontaine was still near the bar, still working the crowd, still filling whatever space he stood in, with the loud, easy confidence of a man who had never once considered that someone in the room might already know his name from the inside of a forwarded email chain. Devlin watched him, patient, still, waiting. The structural engineer from Marietta was still talking when Devlin's phone buzzed. He didn't reach for it immediately. He let the man finish his sentence, something about drainage codes, and then he smiled and said, "Excuse me 1 second," and stepped back from the conversation with the quiet ease of someone who had somewhere specific to be. He looked down at the screen. 1 text, Ingrid's name at the top. Here. He slipped the phone back into his pocket. He set his champagne glass on a side table near the hallway. He moved through the room the way he always moved, unhurried, visible but unobtrusive, nodding once to a man he'd spoken with earlier near the fireplace. He reached the front door and opened it. The night air was warm and still. The circular driveway was lit from below by landscape lights set into the lawn's edge, and the first thing Devlin saw was the truck, his rusted F-150, parked exactly where he'd left it, looking exactly like what it was. The peeling paint caught the light in patches, the cracked passenger mirror tilted slightly outward, and behind it, low to the ground and matte black and utterly silent, sat the Ferrari Roma. It was the color of something that didn't need to announce itself. No chrome, no flash, just clean, dark lines, and the particular stillness of a machine that is very fast and knows it doesn't have to prove that right now. The landscape lights ran along its body like water. Ingrid stood beside the driver's door in a charcoal blazer, the keys held loosely at her side. She looked at Devlin the way she always looked at him when she had completed a task. Direct, composed, waiting for acknowledgement. Behind Devlin, on the wide stone steps of the Harmon estate, a cluster of guests had gone quiet. He could feel it without turning around. The specific silence of people recalibrating what they're looking at. He walked down the steps. He was almost to Ingrid when he heard the door open again behind him. He didn't turn around immediately. He took the keys from Ingrid's hand first. She nodded once, small, precise, and stepped to the side. Then he turned. Priya stood in the doorway. She had come out alone. Her expression when she first saw the Ferrari was confusion. Genuine, unguarded. The kind that moves across a careful person's face before they can stop it. Then came something else. A shift behind the eyes. The recalculation he had expected. The quiet, rapid reassessment of a woman whose greatest skill was reading a room and who had just found herself several steps behind the room she was in. And then, after that, colder, stiller. Something that had no clean name, but that Devlin recognized as the first real moment of understanding. He looked at her from the driveway. "I parked the truck myself," he said. His voice was easy, conversational. Didn't want Ingrid to have to deal with the door. He held up the Ferrari keys briefly, not showing them off, just completing the sentence, and slid them into his jacket pocket. Priya said nothing. The guests on the steps were very quiet. Devlin nodded toward the party behind her. "After you," he said. He stayed another 40 minutes. He didn't make a scene of it. He didn't work the room any harder than he had before. He finished a conversation with a woman from Priya's firm about a historic renovation project on Ponce de Leon. He accepted a small plate of food from a server and ate it standing near the window. He laughed once at something the structural engineer said, and the laugh was real. When he was ready, he said his goodbyes, warm ones. He shook hands and nodded and told 3 different people it was good to meet them, and meant it sufficiently. He found Priya near the far end of the room and thanked her for the invitation. She received it with her face composed perfectly, the warmth back in place, almost convincing. "Of course," she said. He left. Outside, the night was the same as when he'd arrived. Warm, still, the landscape lights burning low along the driveway edge. He clicked the key fob once. The Ferrari's lights blinked. He got in. The engine turned over like a held breath released. He pulled out of the circular driveway slowly. No theater, just a man leaving a party. Inside, Bryce Fontaine had drifted to the doorway. He stood with his drink, watching the taillights of the Ferrari curve down the long driveway and disappear into the dark beyond the hedge line. He turned to Priya, who had come to stand beside him without his noticing. "Who is that guy exactly?" Bryce asked. Priya watched the empty driveway. The place where the lights had been was just dark now. Quiet hedges, still air, the sound of the party behind them, carrying on without them. She didn't answer. She stood there for a long moment after the taillights were gone, staring at nothing, at the dark curve of the driveway, at the rusted F-150 still parked at the edge of the light. The Carter Osei offices sat on the 14th floor of a building on Peachtree Road, in the part of Buckhead where the streets were clean and the lobbies had good stone floors. The elevator opened directly into their suite. There was no reception desk, just a long hallway with framed architectural renderings on both walls, each one a project completed or underway, each one labeled with a city and a date and nothing else. Devlin arrived at 7:45. He made coffee in the small kitchen off the main hall, changed into the fresh shirt he kept in his office closet, and was at his desk with a red pen and a set of site plans by 8. The office was quiet at that hour. The city outside the windows was bright and already moving. Kwame arrived at 8:15. He dropped his bag, poured his own coffee, and came to stand in Devlin's doorway. "How'd it go?" he asked. Devlin didn't look up from the site plan. "The way we planned." Kwame nodded once. He came in and sat in the chair across the desk, the one he always took, angled slightly toward the window, and opened his laptop. They worked in silence for a few minutes. It was a comfortable silence, the kind that comes from years of working in the same room. Eventually Kwame said, "We've got the equity call at 10. Birmingham site review at 2. I want to walk through the financing structure before the call. Give me 20 minutes on this drainage revision first. Take 30. Devlin took 20. When they moved to the conference room, Kwame pulled up the week's project sheet on the wall screen. Carter OC Development Group. 4 completed projects listed along the left column. 2 in Atlanta, 1 in Charlotte, 1 in Birmingham. The Birmingham project was the current one. 200 units, affordable luxury, mixed income structure, $47 million in committed private equity. Pre-construction phase. Groundbreaking estimated for late spring. It was not a small operation. It had also been, for nearly 2 years, almost entirely invisible to anyone who wasn't looking for it. The holding company that owned Carter OC had a name that sounded like a regional logistics firm. Their website was functional but sparse. Devlin's LinkedIn profile had not been updated since his old firm. His apartment lease, the modest one, a 1-bedroom in Decatur, was still the address attached to his personal accounts. He still drove the truck to most places. He had not changed his tax mailing address. To anyone running a casual check on Devlin Carter, the picture was plain. A divorced architect in his 40s, mid-level career, nothing remarkable happening. He had built it that way on purpose. "She's going to start asking questions now," Kwame said. He said it without looking up from his laptop. "A plain fact," stated plainly. "I know. The Ferrari changes the math for her. She's going to pull at threads." Devlin leaned back in his chair. "Let her pull. Let her ask the wrong ones." Kwame looked at him then. He held the look for a moment, not skeptical, just measuring. Then he nodded and went back to the screen. They spent the next 40 minutes walking through the financing structure for the equity call. Kwame was meticulous about it. He built the picture from the bottom up: cost basis, projected returns, debt structure, contingency reserves, the way a man builds something he intends to stand on. Devlin asked 2 questions and made 1 suggestion, and Kwame incorporated it without ceremony. This was how they worked. Had worked for 3 years. It had produced 4 completed projects and 1 in progress and a reputation, quiet but real, among the kind of investors who didn't need a flashy website to make a decision. After the financing walkthrough, Kwame set down his pen. "There's something else," he said. He pulled up a different document, smaller, a background disclosure filed with a federal securities database, the kind of filing that lived in the public record but required knowing where to look. "I ran a routine broker check last week on a few names tied to the equity group's Atlanta affiliates. Bryce Fontaine came up." He turned the laptop so Devlin could see it. "Not as an affiliate. He's in a footnote." Devlin leaned forward. The document was a federal securities disclosure from 4 years ago. A commercial real estate deal in South Carolina. A brokered transaction involving a mixed-use property that had collapsed after the closing. The buyer had alleged misrepresentation of zoning variances. The deal had unraveled publicly. There had been investigations, no charges filed. Bryce Fontaine's name was in paragraph 9. Listed as a broker of record on a related transaction. Present in the record. Never charged. Someone had protected him. Devlin read the paragraph twice. His expression didn't change. He straightened up, set his pen flat on the table, and looked at the rendering of the Birmingham project pinned to the far wall. "File it," he said. He said nothing more. He pulled the Birmingham site plan back toward him and picked up his red pen and turned his attention back to the drainage revision on the lower east corner of the property. The equity call was in 40 minutes. There was still work to do. The restaurant was called Oleander. It sat on a quiet block in Midtown, the kind of place with white tablecloths and a host who knew your name if you came often enough. Priya came often enough. She was already seated when Devlin arrived. That was intentional. He knew that without needing to think about it. Arriving first meant she controlled the table, the sightlines, the opening position. He didn't mind. He had arrived 3 minutes early and sat in the bar area and watched her be seated through the glass partition. And then he had waited 2 more minutes before walking in. She stood when she saw him, kissed him on the cheek. Smelled expensive. "Thank you for coming," she said. "Really?" "Of course," Devlin said. They sat. The menus were leather-bound and the lighting was warm and the room hummed with quiet money. Priya ordered sparkling water. Devlin ordered still. They looked at the menus for a moment, and then she set hers down, which meant she already knew what she wanted, which meant she had been here recently. "I want to say something before we get into anything else," she said. Her voice was measured, earnest in the way that required practice. "What I said at the party, about the truck, that was unkind. I was performing for the room and I did it at your expense and I'm sorry." She held his gaze when she said it. Steady. The apology had shape to it. Not vague, not overlong. She had thought about how it should sound. Devlin nodded slowly. "I appreciate that," he said. "It's fine, Priya, really." She let out a small breath, relief, or a performance of it. I want things to be okay between us. We were part of each other's lives for a long time." "We were," he agreed. "And things are okay." She smiled. The waiter came. They ordered. She got the halibut. He got the roasted chicken. They talked about nothing for a few minutes. The neighborhood, a new building going up nearby, whether Atlanta had finally figured out its traffic. Comfortable talk. Old habit talk. Then she said, "So, how's work? You mentioned Birmingham at the party." There it was. "Yeah, there's a project down there," Devlin said. He cut a small piece of bread from the loaf between them. "Mixed income development. Still in the early phase. Keeping me busy." "Mixed income how? Residential?" "Mostly. Some ground floor retail." He lifted one shoulder. "Nothing dramatic? Just steady work." She nodded, processing. "Are you still at— I thought you'd left your old firm." "I did, a while back. Doing my own thing now. Small operation." He smiled at her. Easy, unbothered. "Nothing like what you're doing, I'm sure. How's the practice?" The shift was smooth enough that she followed it. She talked about her firm for several minutes. A case that had gone well, a partner she respected, the particular exhaustion of billable hours during a complex negotiation. She was good at talking about her work. She had always been good at that. "And Bryce?" Devlin asked. He said it warmly. Curious, but not probing. "The way you ask about someone's fiancé." "I didn't get much of a chance to talk to him at the party. He seems to know everyone." Priya's expression softened. The kind of soft that happens when someone thinks they're being read correctly. "He does. He's been in Atlanta commercial real estate for a long time. He's got a big deal coming. Through Alderman Capital. He's been working toward it for months." "Good for him," Devlin said. And he meant it in the way that meant nothing at all. They finished lunch at a pace she set. She was warm through all of it. She told a story about her mother that made him laugh. It was a good story, and she told it well. They split the bill even though she'd offered to pay, and he let her offer, and then suggested they split it. And she agreed in a way that seemed to surprise her slightly. She hugged him at the door. "This was good," she said. "I'm glad we did this." "Me too," he said. He watched her walk to her car. She had what she came for, or thought she did. A man who was fine, busy with something small in Birmingham. No threat, no grievance worth worrying about. The truck had been a cruelty, she'd apologized, and the man she'd married had accepted it graciously and asked about her fiancé with a smile. She would sleep well tonight. That evening, Devlin called Aunt Celeste from his kitchen while the sun went down over the city. She picked up on the second ring. "Hey, baby." "Hey, Auntie. How are you doing?" Not the casual version, the version that meant she was actually asking. "I'm okay," he said. "That's not what I asked." He was quiet for a second. He leaned against the counter. "I had lunch with Priya today." A pause. "Lord, how'd that go?" "The way I expected." "And how are you doing?" "Not the lunch. You." He thought about it honestly. "I'll be okay when it's done." "Devlin." Her voice shifted, still warm, but with weight behind it. "I need you to hear me. Don't let this eat up more of your life than it already has. You understand? I've seen people win their case and still lose themselves chasing it. It's not like that." "Then what's it like?" "It's focused," he said. "It's not hollow, Auntie." "I know the difference." She was quiet for a moment, like she was deciding whether to push or trust him. She trusted him. "What comes next?" "Kwame's still pulling records. From the divorce." He paused. "There are some financial documents we haven't finished going through." "Okay," she said. "Just that." She understood enough not to need the rest. They talked for another 10 minutes about other things, her neighbor's dog, a cousin's graduation, whether Memphis summers were getting worse. By the time they hung up, something in his chest had loosened, the way it only ever did after talking to her. He set the phone down on the counter. He walked to the table and opened his laptop. The screen came to life. A folder sat on the desktop, already open from the night before. A collection of archived financial documents from the divorce proceedings, organized by date and type, waiting. The conference room smelled like coffee and old paper. Kwame had gotten there before Devlin. The archived documents were already spread across the long table by the time Devlin walked in. Printed pages and digital files pulled up on the laptop screen, organized in the way Kwame organized everything, by date, by type, by what each thing proved. There was a yellow legal pad beside the laptop with notes in Kwame's small, precise handwriting. Devlin set his coffee down. He looked at the table. He sat. "Walk me through it," he said. Kwame didn't sit. He stood at the head of the table the way he always did when he was explaining something he needed Devlin to understand completely. "During the divorce proceedings," Kwame said, "Priya's team submitted a full financial disclosure. Standard. Both sides do it. You value the assets. You divide the estate. You move on." He tapped a page near the center of the table. "This is the section on professional goodwill." Devlin looked at the page. It was dense with numbers and formal language. "Professional goodwill is basically your value as a professional," Kwame continued. "Your client relationships, your industry reputation, the pipeline you'd built, the contracts you were working toward, the referrals that were coming in, the name you'd made for yourself over 15 years. He paused. "It gets counted as part of the marital estate. It has real dollar value." "I know what it is," Devlin said quietly. "Right." Kwame pulled the page closer to him. "Priya's disclosure valued yours at just under $11,000. The room was very quiet. Devlin looked up. "11,000, he said. $11,240. Kwame said each word flat and clean. "For 15 years of client relationships, your project pipeline, your professional reputation in 3 markets." Devlin set his coffee down carefully. He didn't say anything. "I pulled comparable valuations from similar divorce cases. Same industry, similar experience levels. The standard range for someone at your career stage was between $200,000 and $400,000. Conservatively, Kwame let that number sit. Her team valued you at less than 11 grand. Devlin was still. The valuation was prepared by a financial consultant named Gerald Hatch, Kwame said. He reached past the spread of documents and turned the laptop screen toward Devlin. On it was a LinkedIn profile, A middle-aged man with a firm handshake kind of face and a short list of credentials. Hatch has been in Atlanta for about 12 years. He does financial consulting, forensic accounting, business valuation. Kwame pointed to a line on the screen. He and Bryce Fontaine have 3 mutual professional associations. They co-presented at a commercial real estate financial seminar in 2019. I also found an email from the same chain I pulled last month, where Bryce references Hatch by first name. Devlin looked at the screen. He looked at the name, Gerald Hatch. She brought in Bryce's guy, he said. She brought in Bryce's guy, Kwame confirmed. While you were sitting across the table from her attorneys thinking the numbers were clean, Hatch was valuing your professional life at $11,000, which reduced the marital estate, which cut what she owed you in the settlement. He closed the laptop. You walked away from that marriage thinking you got your fair share. You didn't. Devlin sat very still. He wasn't looking at the documents anymore. He was looking at the middle of the table, at nothing, the way a man looks when he is taking something apart inside himself and needs to be careful about it. He thought about those months after the divorce, working out of a rented desk downtown, rebuilding every client relationship one call at a time, thinking the split had been clean, at least, that whatever else she'd taken, the financial piece had been fair. He had told himself that. He had held on to it. He had held on to a lie she built for him. The betrayal had come in layers. He'd thought he found all of them. The email chain, the bid intelligence, the 3 lost contracts. He thought he understood the full shape of what she'd done. He hadn't. While he was sitting at a conference table signing his name to documents and grieving a marriage, she and Bryce had been coordinating, not just afterward, during. While he was still trying to hold himself together, they were deciding what his professional life was worth. And the number they chose was $11,000. He sat with that for a long time. The room stayed quiet. Kwame didn't push him. He understood the weight of what he'd just laid on the table, and he gave Devlin the space to carry it. Finally, Devlin spoke. "Find me a litigator," he said. His voice was level. No shake in it. Not a divorce attorney. A forensic financial litigator. Someone who has taken apart fraudulent asset disclosures before and won. He looked at Kwame. Before the end of the week. Kwame nodded once. He closed the folder. Both men sat in silence for a moment. The kind of silence that comes after something important has been decided and before the work of it begins. Then Kwame picked up his phone and started making calls. The call lasted 4 minutes. Devlin made it from his office, door closed, mid-morning, 3 days after Kwame started building the litigator relationship. He'd found Bryce Fontaine's direct number through a commercial real estate directory, the kind of thing any developer might use. He dialed it the same way he might call a vendor about a material order. Relaxed, purposeful. Bryce picked up on the second ring. "Bryce Fontaine." "Bryce, this is Devlin Carter. We met briefly at the Harmon engagement party a couple weeks back. I don't know if you remember." "Dev." "Yeah, absolutely." The wariness was there underneath the easy tone, quick and instinctive. But so was the curiosity. Bryce was the kind of man who always wanted to know why someone was calling before he decided how to feel about it. "Good to hear from you, man. What can I do for you?" "I've been meaning to reach out," Devlin said. "I heard through a couple of people that you're pretty active on the Atlanta commercial side right now. We're in a similar lane. I figured we should probably know each other professionally. I try not to let those things go too long." A short pause. Bryce, recalculating. "Yeah, no, absolutely," Bryce said. And this time the warmth was a degree more genuine. "Always good to build relationships. You're with Carter Ossie, right? I've seen some of your work." "That's us," Devlin said. "Good outfit. Yeah, let's grab coffee." "When works for you?" They settled on Thursday morning. Midtown, a place Bryce suggested. Devlin agreed without negotiating the location. He hung up. He looked at the phone for a moment. Then he set it face down on the desk and went back to work. Thursday was gray and cool for Atlanta, the sky the color of old concrete. Bryce was already at the table when Devlin arrived. A deliberate move, Devlin noted, the kind of thing men like Bryce did to feel like they were controlling the room. He was dressed well, expensive watch, the easy, practiced posture of someone who had spent 20 years performing comfort in professional settings. They shook hands. Devlin sat. They talked the way two men in adjacent industries talk, when one of them is being careful and the other thinks he's the one being careful. Bryce asked questions about Carter O.C., with the kind of casual interest that was actually anything but casual. Devlin answered them with the precision of a man offering exactly the right amount. Enough to be credible, not enough to be useful. At the 20-minute mark, Devlin said, "We've got an upcoming deal we're going to need a broker on. Significant one. Commercial mixed use, strong equity position. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but when we're ready to talk specifics, I'd like you on the short list." Bryce kept his expression steady, but something behind his eyes sharpened. A deal. A significant one. His mind was already running numbers. "I'd be very interested in that conversation," he said. "Good." Devlin nodded once, like it was settled. "I'll be in touch." They wrapped up shortly after. Easy handshakes, easy smiles. Bryce walked to his car looking like a man who had just been handed something, though he couldn't have said exactly what. Devlin drove back to Buckhead. He did not think about Bryce again for the rest of the day. Aunt Celeste arrived Saturday afternoon in a rental car she insisted on paying for herself. Wearing a yellow blouse and carrying a covered dish she'd somehow transported from Memphis without catastrophe. She walked through the front door of Devlin's real home. Not the modest apartment lease he maintained like a stage prop, but the place where he actually lived, and stood in the entryway for a moment, looking at it. "Well," she said, "you've been busy." The house was warm and well kept. Clean lines, good light, the kind of space that reflected a man who designed buildings for a living. Not flashy, just right. Kwame arrived at 6 with a bottle of wine and the particular ease of a man who was good at being a guest. He and Celeste took to each other immediately. She asked him 3 direct questions within the first 10 minutes, and he answered all 3 without hedging. And after that, they were fine. Devlin cooked. Nothing complicated. Braised chicken. Good rice. Something Celeste taught him years ago that he'd never stopped making. The 3 of them ate at the kitchen table, and the conversation moved the way good dinner conversation moves, sideways and warm, landing occasionally on something real. At some point, Kwame told a story about a zoning meeting that had gone completely sideways, and the way he told it, dry and precise, building to the absurdity of it, made Devlin laugh. Not a polite laugh. A real one. Sudden and uncalculated, the kind that arrived before he could decide whether to let it. Celeste looked at him when it happened. She didn't say anything, but she noticed. After dinner, when the dishes were cleared and Kwame was finishing the last of his wine, he mentioned it the way he mentioned most important things, without ceremony. "Got a confirmation Friday," he said. Alderman Capital agreed to a meeting. "Next Wednesday." Devlin nodded. Celeste looked between them. She understood enough. Later, Devlin walked Celeste to her rental car in the driveway. The night was quiet. The neighborhood was the kind of still that only comes late on a weekend, when the city exhales. She stopped at the driver's side door and turned to face him. She reached out and took his hand in both of hers, the gesture she had used since he was a boy, firm and unhurried. "I'm proud of you," she said. "Not for what you're doing to them, for who you are while you're doing it." Devlin looked at her. He nodded once. She got in the car. He stood in the driveway and watched her taillights disappear down the street. The Biltmore Ballroom was the kind of room that made people stand a little straighter. High ceilings, warm gold light. Round tables dressed in white linen, each one occupied by people who had spent their careers learning how to look like they belonged in exactly this kind of place. Devlin and Kwame arrived together, unhurried, checking in at the registration table without ceremony. Devlin wore a dark suit, well cut, current, nothing that announced itself. Kwame had his name badge clipped to his lapel before they'd taken 3 steps into the room. "Alderman's table is center left," Kwame said quietly. "Marcus Webb is here. Brought 2 of his principals." Devlin didn't look. "I see them." The room was full. Atlanta's architecture and development community turned out for this event every year. Developers, brokers, engineers, equity partners, the people who built the city and the people who financed the building. The kind of gathering where a conversation at the right moment could move a deal forward by 3 months, or kill one before it started. Devlin moved through it the way he always moved through rooms, warm, unhurried, pausing to greet people he knew, which turned out to be more people than most would have expected. He had been building relationships in this city for 15 years. They didn't evaporate because he kept a low profile. He spotted Priya and Bryce 20 minutes in. Bryce was near the bar. Of course he was. He was dressed sharply and working the room with the practiced energy of a man who had something to celebrate. Or thought he did. Priya was beside him in a deep green dress, elegant and composed, scanning the crowd the way she always did, reading the room for useful information. She saw Devlin. Something passed across her face, brief, controlled, and then she smiled and looked away. Devlin accepted a glass of water from a passing server and went to find his seat. The program began at 7:30. Remarks from the event chair. A panel award for a sustainable design firm out of Decatur. Dinner service running alongside. The quiet, efficient movement of staff around the edges of the room. The Regional Development Award was third on the program. The MC, a woman from the Atlanta Business Chronicle who did these things well, read from her notes with enough warmth to keep it from sounding like a recitation. The Regional Development Award this year recognizes a project that meets an exceptional standard, not just in design and execution, but in community impact. She paused. The Eastbrook Mixed-Use Development in Birmingham, Alabama. Developed by Carter Osei Development Group. Projected to generate 340 permanent jobs upon full occupancy. Completed on schedule. Backed by a $47 million private equity partnership. She looked up from the page. Please welcome to the stage Devlin Carter. The applause was genuine, not thunderous. This was a professional audience, not a crowd, but real. Devlin stood, buttoned his jacket, and walked to the podium. He kept it brief. He thanked his partner. He thanked the Birmingham community. He mentioned the team by name, the engineers, the contractors, the people who had actually built the thing. He said he hoped to do it again, somewhere new, for someone who needed it. 2 minutes, measured. He walked off the stage, and the room moved on. He did not look at Priya while he spoke. He did not need to. Marcus Webb found him before he was fully back to his seat. Webb was 60, silver-haired, the kind of man who had been in private equity long enough that he'd stopped needing to perform authority. He just had it. He crossed the room with one of his principals, a younger woman named Diane Park, whom Devlin had spoken with twice in the past month, and extended his hand. "Well deserved," Webb said. "That Birmingham project is exactly the kind of thing we should be doing more of in this region." "We thought so," Devlin said. They talked for 4 minutes, standing near the edge of the room, visible to anyone who cared to look. Webb mentioned the next project. Devlin confirmed the timeline. Diane said something about the financing structure that made Kwame, who had appeared at Devlin's shoulder quietly, nod once in agreement. It was a professional conversation, warm but efficient, the kind that only happens between people who have already done the harder work in private. Across the room, Bryce Fontaine had gone very still. He was watching Webb. He was watching Devlin. He was watching the body language of men who had already made a decision, And slowly, visibly, the shape of the evening reorganized itself in his understanding. His expression didn't collapse. It was more like something behind it did. The easy confidence he'd carried in all evening lost its foundation, and what replaced it was something quieter and much less comfortable. Priya stood beside him. She watched Devlin shake Marcus Webb's hand. She watched Webb laugh at something Kwame said. She said nothing. In the car, heading back through the city, Kwame drove, and Devlin sat in the passenger seat, jacket unbuttoned, the award on the back seat in its presentation box. The Atlanta skyline moved past the window, lit up and steady, the way it always was. "Ready for the week ahead?" Kwame asked. "Yes," Devlin said. He looked out the window. The city kept moving. The demand letter arrived at Priya's attorney's office at 9:14 in the morning. By 10:40, Priya was calling Devlin's cell. He let it ring twice. Then he answered. "I got your attorney's letter," she said. Her voice was controlled, careful, the voice she used in depositions. "I know," Devlin said. A pause. "I think we should talk." "I agree. My attorney's office, 2 o'clock. Another pause, shorter this time. "Fine." He hung up and went back to his coffee. The conference room was on the 14th floor of a building on Peachtree Street. Clean lines, a long table, 4 chairs on each side, though only 6 of them were used. Devlin arrived first. He sat down, set a glass of water in front of him, and waited. Priya came in 3 minutes later with her attorney, a sharp man named Feld, who Devlin had researched 2 weeks ago. She wore a dark blazer and her hair pulled back. Professional, composed. She looked at Devlin the way you look at something you're trying to accurately measure. Devlin's litigator, a woman named Sandra Pruitt, opened a manila folder and placed it flat on the table. She did not slide it across. She simply opened it. "We'll let my client begin," she said. Devlin nodded once. He looked at Priya. Not at Feld. At Priya. "I'm going to tell you what I know," he said. "And then I'm going to tell you what happens next." He kept his voice even, unhurried. He started with the valuation, the financial disclosure she had filed during the divorce proceedings, the way her consultant had assessed his professional goodwill, his client relationships, his pipeline, 15 years of built reputation, and assigned it a number that was, by any honest measure, fiction. He named the consultant. He named the firm. He noted the time-stamped professional association between that consultant and Bryce Fontaine, documented through shared filings, joint event appearances, and 2 co-signed letters of reference going back 6 years. Then he moved to the email chain. He didn't read from it. He'd had it memorized for 18 months. He described the 3 contracts, the bids he had cultivated, the competing numbers that should have been impossible, how bid intelligence that could only have come from inside his project files, files Priya had access to as his wife, ended up shaping the competing offers with a precision that wasn't coincident. He named the contracts. He named the competing group. He named the margin by which each bid was undercut. The room was very quiet. Those contracts represented 18 months of work, he said. And approximately, he glanced at Sandra, who supplied the figure without expression, $900,000 in projected gross revenue. Feld leaned over and wrote something on his notepad. Priya did not move. "I'm not here for an apology," Devlin said. He said it simply, without edge. "I want you to understand that. What I'm here for is to tell you what's happening next." Sandra took over then, efficient and precise. 2 filings, a civil suit for fraud in the divorce proceeding, and a separate claim for tortious interference with business relations. They had the email chain, the competing bid records, and full documentation of the consultant's relationship with Bryce. The forensic financial analysis had been completed and signed by an expert who had testified in 31 cases. Feld asked for time to review the documentation. Sandra said They had 72 hours. Priya looked at Devlin once before she left. Just once. There was no warmth in it, but there was no contempt either. What was? There was something that looked, if you knew her well enough, like the first cold understanding of how badly she had miscalculated. She didn't say anything. She walked out. Bryce called at 4:15. Devlin was in the car, heading back to the office. He answered on the second ring. "You killed the alderman deal." Bryce's voice was tight and hot. "I know that's what this is. You went around me." "Alderman made a business decision," Devlin said. "Don't do that. Don't be calm with me right now." A pause. "This is personal. You know it is." "Business is always personal to someone," Devlin said. "I just wasn't the one who started it." Silence on the line. Devlin ended the call. Bryce met with his attorney that same afternoon. He was scared now, and scared men talk too much. He laid out his version of events, and somewhere in the middle of it, trying to explain the South Carolina disclosure, trying to explain the email chain, trying to explain how his name ended up adjacent to a financial consultant who had allegedly manipulated a divorce valuation. He said that the information had come from Priya, that she was the one with access, that he had only used what she gave him. His attorney wrote it down. He did not yet understand that Devlin's litigator would have a copy of those notes within the week. Aunt Celeste called Priya's mother at 6 in the evening. She had known the woman for years, back from when the marriage was still intact, back from holidays and family dinners that seemed ordinary at the time. She didn't threaten. She didn't lecture. She said, "Miriam, your daughter needs to settle this, not for his sake, for hers." A pause. "I think you know I wouldn't call you if I didn't mean it." She let that sit. Then she said good night and hung up. Miriam Harmon called Priya at 8:17. The conversation lasted 4 minutes. When it was over, Priya sat at her kitchen table. The demand letter was in front of her, slightly wrinkled at one corner where she had folded and unfolded it earlier in the day. The apartment was quiet. The city moved outside her window, indifferent and lit up. She stared at the letter for a long time. The article ran on a Tuesday. It was tucked inside the business section of an Atlanta trade publication. Not a headline, not a feature. Just a piece on vetting practices in the commercial brokerage industry. Responsible sourcing. Due diligence gaps. The kind of story that lands quietly and stays loud for a long time. Bryce Fontaine's name appeared in paragraph 4. The piece didn't call him a criminal. It didn't have to. It simply noted that his name appeared in a federal securities disclosure tied to a collapsed South Carolina deal, misrepresented zoning variances, a deal that cost investors real money, never charged, but present. That word did the work. Present. By Friday, 6 of his clients had requested full file audits. By the following Thursday, the number was closer to 15. The requests came in one at a time, spaced across 10 days, each one arriving in his inbox like a quiet vote cast in a closed room. Most of them were polite. That almost made it worse. Polite meant they weren't angry. Polite meant they had already decided and were simply observing the formality. Most of them didn't renew. What Bryce had spent 12 years building, a client roster, a reputation for access, the particular confidence of being the man people called first, didn't collapse in one moment. It bled. Slowly, steadily, one non-renewal at a time. His firm placed him on administrative leave pending an internal review. 2 of the remaining partners began quiet conversations about buying out his equity stake. They were not being generous about the number they had in mind. He didn't call Devlin again. The divorce fraud suit settled out of court 6 weeks after the demand letter was delivered. Devlin sat in Sandra Pruitt's office on a Wednesday afternoon and signed the settlement documents without ceremony. The sum recovered was significant. Not everything, but enough to be quantifiable. And more importantly, documented. The settlement included a formal written acknowledgement that the original financial disclosure filed during the divorce proceedings had been incomplete. That line mattered most to him. Sandra offered her hand. He shook it, thanked her, and left. He didn't brief anyone. He didn't post anything. He called Kwame on the walk to his car and said, "It's done." Kwame said, "Good." That was the whole conversation. Priya kept her job. But the partnership track she had been on, the one she had been working toward for 3 careful years, went quietly still. Senior partners asked careful questions. She answered them well. She was good at that. But something had shifted in the room. A coolness, a new distance in the way certain people looked at her when they thought she wasn't watching. She never said anything publicly. Neither did Devlin. The settlement was sealed. But rooms have their own memory. By January, Priya had relocated to a smaller firm in Charlotte. The announcement was professional, brief, framed as an opportunity. No one who knew her well believed that framing. No one said so. Bryce did not help her pack. By then, they had already stopped appearing together. No dramatic ending, no scene, no confrontation. They simply stopped. Like a light someone forgets to turn back on. The Birmingham groundbreaking was held on a Thursday morning in April. The sky was pale blue and wide. The site smelled like turned earth and possibility. A small crowd had gathered: city officials, community members, members of the press, the alderman capital principals who had believed in the project early. The mayor attended and said warm things. Kwame spoke first, precise and composed, the way he always was. He laid out the numbers, the jobs, the units, the timeline, and made them feel real rather than abstract. Then Devlin stepped up. He thanked the mayor. He thanked the community. He said a few words about what it meant to build something in a place that needed it, and he said them plainly, without flourish. He didn't talk about himself. He didn't talk about the road that led here. He just talked about what would stand on that ground when the work was done. The crowd applauded, and he stepped back. He drove home that evening in the truck. Not the Ferrari. The truck. The cracked dashboard. The door that needed coaxing. The particular rattle the engine made at highway speed that he had stopped noticing years ago. He drove with the windows down and the city unspooling behind him. Aunt Celeste was in the kitchen when he got home. The smell of something good reached him at the door. They ate at the kitchen table, the way they always did when she visited. No ceremony, just food, and the easy rhythm of 2 people who had known each other long enough not to perform anything. She studied him across the table for a moment. Then she said, "You feel different." He thought about that, turned it over. "I don't have to carry it anymore," he said. She nodded once, slowly, the way she did when something confirmed what she already knew. After dinner, he stepped out onto the balcony alone. Atlanta spread below him, lit and indifferent and alive. He stood there in the quiet and thought, briefly, of the party, the circular driveway, the polished guests, the pity in Priya's voice when she said pickup. He stood with it for a moment. Then he went inside, closed the balcony door behind him, and didn't think about her again. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.